Ignition liftoff. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have liftoff.
Welcome back to the Launch Box. This week we are joined by the amazing Jordan Mitchell and Liz MacCuish. They are the co-founders of Good Culture, a leading marketing agency that works across all things brand, talent and culture. Between them, they have years of experience in cultural marketing and storytelling, and together they've built Good Culture into a powerhouse agency. Today we're talking all things brand building and what it really takes to create lasting impact. So let's dive in. Please welcome to the podcast Jordan Mitchell and Liz MacCuish. Just a quick one before we start. If you like listening to this episode, which I know you're going to, please like it and subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to share it to your group chat. I'm so excited you're here. This is like, it's kind of weird because I feel like we're sort of hanging out, having a coffee, / at work. This is what we normally do. But what is so interesting is I've known you girls for years, or ladies, should I say. Are we at lady point now?
Well, I mean, I still want to be a girl.
still want to be a girl.
Can we be a girl?
I've got
Girls.
a big birthday coming up, so.
Girls.
We've worked together for many years, but never sort of sat and broken down what it is that we do. We're so kind of in the doing that we never kind of analyse it. And I think it's so interesting to have you here and break down things that we see and know kind of like execution behind it. And I'm always fascinated in the behind the scenes. You both founded Good Culture, which is a cultural marketing agency. I also would like to know, as much as I know, I've been a part of that, what does that mean?
What do we do? Well, I guess cultural marketing as an umbrella term is around making people and brands have impact in culture. And there's not one way of doing that. I guess we look at kind of each individual, each brand as their sort of solo mission and break down what they need to do to get there. So for some people it's PR, for some people it's partnerships, for some brands it's casting, influencer marketing. It's intentionally broad because it's not one size that fits all.
Yes, you're so right. And I think it's so interesting that I've spoken to obviously lots of different founders and, you know, women in business, and marketing is an essential part of everyone's strategy. And I think it's something that a lot of startups perhaps overlook. And I suppose it's happened to me a little bit in terms of when I launched My Little Cocoa, I sort of relied on myself for marketing and didn't actually look beyond that at the start. And actually there's such a bigger picture, and you can have the best product in the world. You can be the best performer, actress, you know, if we're talking brands and people, however that looks, you could be the best in the world. But if nobody knows about it, it doesn't exist, right?
If people don't know about it, it didn't happen. I think people forget that sort of industry standard is to spend between 10 and 20% of your revenue on marketing. So the people that spend a lot more than that typically see that coming back to them. But I think that is not widely understood, that you set up, and as part of your investment structure or what you're literally setting up with on day one, you should factor that in from the get-go. And you don't need to overspend. You don't need to be casting talent or celebrity. You know, if you look at Jacquemus as an example, creativity and best story wins. They are so full of humor and like surrealist marketing. There's never any big talent in those. You know, it's often just, you know, a girl on a boat or somebody with an ironing board and a stack of hats, or it's AI. But it's those kind of, no one can create a viral moment. That's for us to decide whether it ends up being viral. But what they create is humor and escapism that we all want to share.
Yeah, and I suppose it's that kind of distraction, the thing that makes 100%. You go, oh, look at that, like you know, when you're and I'm so
surprise and delight.
Surprise and delight. I'm like, I love branding, I love the detail, and I'm that girl that will always be impressed when brands do that well, because I'm like a marketer's dream, and I understand the world of it, but I still will be sold. So I think it's that thing that sort of gets your attention, isn't it, and makes you look in their direction.
Yeah, and I think it's about creating shareable moments. So for me, you know when a campaign's doing well when it's like landing in your WhatsApp group. You know, when you think about the Super Bowl and the Nike ad, what was the phrase?
So win.
So win. And it was kind of capturing entering like the cultural conversation, which was like, in culture at the moment, it's hard to be a woman. It's hard to be from a marginalised community, particularly in the States with everything that's going on around there. And so what that sort of campaign did by kind of going, you can't win, so win, was like a rally cry. And then you want to share that, you want to post that because it means something. And I think that's when a brand wins. They actually capture the heart and mind. So it's either your imagination and go, oh my God, this is so fun, or it's like something that resonates deep within where you go, that's important and means something to me.
When I think of like my favourite campaigns or my favourite brands, I feel like they're quite explicit on what they are. They're kind of like unapologetic about it. Even like when we launched this podcast, people would be telling people about it, and my team, and we were so excited, and some people like, so you're going to really call out that it's just like female focused in the title? And I'm like, for me, like my favourite moments are people that own it, and I'm like, yes, we're ladies who launch. Like, do you have a vagina? No, guess what? You can't come on. And I want to be that explicit because that is the community. That
best believe there's a lot of podcasts for guys out there.
Correct. But do you know what I mean? I think it's the ones that kind of, and that shouldn't be shocking, but to some it would be. It's the ones that sort of shock you as well that grasp your attention.
I think with the Nike, which was my favourite campaign of recent times as well, the fact that they had not invested in that level of, Super Bowl advertising is widely known as the most expensive in the world. Nike had not shown up since 1988 in that space. And then they decided to put a female skewing advert in a male dominated space. That was not lost on me. So I think that it is, they are intensely trying to provoke within that sort of very male dominated world as well.
And I think to your point around like being true, so to that kind of ladies that launched kind of analogy, I think you just have to say it with your chest, right? And I think so many brands, particularly on the early stages, are wanting to try and be everything to everyone. And actually, if you are everything to everyone, you're nothing to anyone. And so having a strong lens, having a point of view, and actually going, no, this is my audience and this is who I really want to focus in, that's actually how you kind of build brand fame and actually really start to get the cut through.
And I think brands are really starting to realise that now, in terms of like the buzzword for the past couple of years has been community. But I think brands and like big corporates are suddenly realizing that actually it's community first, brand second. Like, because if you've got the people to speak to, then your brand wins, right?
Totally. I think you're doing, firstly, I mean, can we just have a minute for a shout?
Oh gosh.
Can we just have
I don't do these things well.
No, but I think you're a really great example of a founder who really invests in community. And we see that through the events that you did, even just the other day with your lunch for your ladies who launch. I think it is about kind of recognizing those people in your orbit and actually paying it to them, because they're the ones that are going to make your brand famous, because after that they're talking about you to their 10 other people. Those 10 other people are talking about you to their however many others. And we see that with brands like even Refi with Jess Hunt, and actually not doing the influencer trips but doing the community trips.
She does that so well. She does. So well. And I think what's nice about looking sort of on the outside looking in, it doesn't feel gimmicky. No. It doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like a box ticker.
No.
Genuinely, she's invested in that because she knows they are the people that have been propping Refi up.
Absolutely.
So we touched on community there, which seems like it's become everybody's focus, which I love. And I think it's so important, and I really believe in leading community first. What do you think are the fundamentals when launching a brand?
Well, I do think, not to hammer on about community, that for me is the fundamental, because without your audience you don't actually have a brand. And we've done this for a number of brands. So when we launched Tracy Ellis Ross's brand Pattern to the UK,
that was so good.
Tracy, we love you. It was all about community. And actually, prior to even launching that brand, what we did was hold workshops for, I'm going to say the community again,
You
but
say
for the
it.
community, where we were getting people kind of on board on the journey. So we were kind of finding out about their hair care journey, finding out what the gaps are in the market, finding out what they needed for their brands or from their brands. And we did a series of those prior to launch so that we had built up an audience so that when we did launch, they felt proprietary over it. Like they were like, this is my brand.
Yeah.
And I think creating a space where people can have that sense of ownership, we even see it with Topicals, which is an incredible, again, female-founded brand. And people are just so hyped and protective over it because they feel like it's theirs. Same with how we felt about My Little Coco. And I know I'm being biased because, you know, we work together. But it was kind of like, we saw how invested you were in that brand, that every time you'd go to Boots and you'd be like, oh my God, just checking if everything's okay. And you're like, wow, we're part of that journey. So bringing people on the journey is fundamental.
And I think what is so interesting, like you touch on those workshops, that actually that is something that anybody can take away from this, because it's not necessarily front facing.
No.
So there's so much that happens as in building before anybody even sees it. It's not like this is it. Let's try and make a community
and it can
happen.
Be free.
No.
You will have within your orbit, or we use this whole, we're one person away from kind of being able to get to anyone. You can do those focus groups, and it can be such a shortcut to success if you really, really listen and then apply the learnings. And then the end result is that you do get an audience that feel proprietary over your product and then just want to go and tell everyone about it.
Yeah, and that is so interesting because Jo Malone spoke on that so well. She's got something that she recommends to everybody called the pizza boardroom. And it's like, I love the idea of it. She says, listen, you don't need to have a board at the start because you're never going to be able to afford to do that front end unless you've got a big investor behind you. But she said, do you know what? I call it the pizza boardroom. Get a couple of pizzas, grab your girls over, however that looks, and you've got a board. Like there's always like this idea of kind of not sharing stuff with people that are closest to you. And I don't really understand why, because look, I know that there'll always be that person that can maybe put you off stuff or kind of take you down a different path of limiting beliefs. But actually, if you look hard enough, everybody's got people that they could trust or they could run an idea by and actually get some valid feedback back.
Totally. It's about having that open dialogue. And I also think another kind of key fundamental to launching is, you know, leveraging the power of social media. Like when you think about the level of access, you can contact pretty much anyone using any platform, whether it's kind of Instagram, TikTok, you know. I think of even just when we first started Good Culture and we were like DMing some like people that we wanted to sign. And, you know, maybe 20 years ago, you wouldn't have even had that opportunity. And I think about like when Thea Green, who was someone we worked with many years ago, who founded Nails Inc. And she was like, I could only find contacts on the Yellow Pages. Like imagine having to open like the Yellow Pages, being like, and now you can slip into someone's DM. So as a new brand, particularly if you've got a product, you can kind of just contact the people you adore and go, I love the content you put out there. I really think that you'd really love to receive X and X from my brand. And they don't have to be big names. Like start small, start with a micro influencer community or those kind of KOLs is what we call them, like key opinion leaders, just people who have a small community of their own who can then advocate and endorse your brand.
And I think it's almost like kind of not being ashamed to do that. I think we live in such a fear of like, I don't want to message her just in case she finds this a little bit forward. Guess what?
They don't have to come back to you.
They don't have to come back to you. And actually, like, what's the worst that could happen?
Yeah, and 9 out of 10 times, you know, if someone sends you something thoughtful and considered enough, you actually want to help people out.
Yes.
It goes back to personalisation, something you were saying earlier about, you know, just the we live in this world of abundance and we're trying to find a way through the treacle. We're trying to, I mean, even when I think about like opening Netflix of an evening, trying to work out what to watch.
It's
so you rely on this curation idea, whether that comes from girls in the office or people at home. And I think personalisation is everything. So something Burberry did the other day, they just had their show in London Fashion Week, is they on their social media got very artful initials at the top of the pictures. So there must have been, we have Rosie Hunterton-Whiteley as a client who was a guest. There must have been 500 different pictures of her taken, some by really artful photographers, some by more traditional paps, some by her sister, her manager, whatever. It was the one that had her initials on it that she reposted. She's been in that, maybe even wasn't the best picture of her, but there's something about, when someone bothers to send you
that
something
effort.
and it's got a bit of an initial on it, or it's got a phrase, or like your kid's birthday, it's so much, it's not a lot of effort, but actually as a receiver, every single time it means something. It really, really does.
Going the extra mile. And like you say, that is something that is
Yeah.
such a simple touch.
So simple.
In the edit that might have taken a few seconds, but that is the thing that you go, that's really nice you've done that for me.
Works every time.
The thought it's like receiving that card or that bunch of flowers when something happens, you'll always remember it. What do you girls think is one of the most sort of standout moments of the year so far in terms of marketing and a campaign that's really landed to you?
Well, we spoke about the Nike So Win one, which I just think trumps everything. Something else I saw the other day, which I thought was really brilliant and something we strive for at Good Culture, is trying to destigmatize things and like take taboos on head first. So we've looked at the menopause. We've looked at, it's always things for women.
It is.
And there was a campaign with Purcell and Arsenal ladies the other day, which was kind of removing the stigma around menstruation whilst being on the sports field.
Amazing.
And, I've got a 12-year-old daughter who, I know we've all got daughters.
And got the girls.
She said to me the other day, I'm really craving chocolate. And I was like, no,
oh my
it's
gosh,
coming.
I know.
It's coming.
I'm there.
You're there.
We're waiting.
We're waiting. And I've got everything prepped, which my mum probably didn't have access to. I've got the period knickers. There's some at her dad's. There's some in a school bag. There's everywhere. And I'm trying to talk to her about, we work with Speedo, trying to talk to her about, you don't have to not swim because there's this technology and whatever, but it's still mortifying. And to have these heroic, I think that there's talent as in actors and musicians that we hold in high regard, and then there's athletes.
Yes. Yes.
Like, it's down to taste whether you make it as an artist. But if you're an athlete, we look after the fastest woman in the UK. We look after the British #1 tennis player. Like, they've earned that. We can all have the athlete mindset, but they've earned the right to be there. So when they're in a campaign, there's a new level of hero worshipping and authenticity. And you've got the Lionesses, a lot of the Arsenal team, one of our clients is Alessia Risso is one. She's kind of talking about bleeding and menstruation like it is literally just so normalized, and then the kids are going into school talking about it, and it's not going to be a huge kind of instant change, but if that is the topic of conversation at school that day, then well done Purcell for facilitating that.
And it's almost like it's so smart from Purcell because there's every element, like you say. I remember being at school being like, sorry sir, I can't swim or I can't run because I've got my period.
Yeah.
But actually to see somebody on a pitch being active, being female and embracing every part of that, it's actually genius.
It's so empowering.
Yeah, and I think also, firstly, it wasn't too long ago when they were doing the whole period thing. It was like blue blood. Do you remember? Like in the ads, it'd be like blue blood versus. It was like we can't even have red blood, guys. Not to completely go off the point, but literally, look how far we've come.
It's down 360.
We're making some progress. But I think also just off the back of that piece around sort of sport, we're really noticing the sort of convergence of sport and fashion like unlike any time before. It's really growing momentum, so you're seeing that now with like Skims and Nike. Genius. Which that's just out and that's incredible, but we're also seeing it with a lot of kind of really great partnerships. So like now with the Formula One and kind of Louis Vuitton and the whole LVMH group, Charlotte Tilbury Formula One. So I think we're kind of, I think that's what's really exciting and interesting, the momentum of kind of sport, fashion, beauty, and where that's going to go.
Yeah, and how everyone can coexist together. Like you say, it's been very kind of everyone in their lane and everyone sort of in their own box, but actually
starting to
I'm
come together a
interested
lot
in
more.
fashion and sport.
Well, if you
and
look at
beauty,
the-
guess what? Like, it's,
Bring it
we
all
all
in.
consume a bit of everything,
Yeah,
don't we?
they feed into each other. And guess what? When we talk to our athletes, they want to be at fashion shows. The designers are obsessed with the skill set and the discipline and all of those things that the athletes have. So something like Vogue World that happens once a year, it was in Paris last year. You've got Serena Williams and amazing track and field athletes walking the runway, looking amazing because the physicality is almost like leveled up what a model could look like.
Yeah.
And it's just not this siloed world. It is that convergence. And we're seeing, the major investment happening in particularly women's sports marketing. Some big players. The government had an initiative, and from a summit last year, there is now £63 billion going into sports marketing, specifically at women next year.
See, that is just incredible. I mean, we like that.
we like that.
Anything specific women's stat. I'm like,
Yeah.
We're here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And anything with a billion involved.
Also, like, there's loads of
We're
we love a
here.
Billy moment, but there's loads of evidence to suggest that female sports marketing is so much. The consumers love it because it's thoughtful, it's progressive, it's sensitive, it's all the things. It's the way we want to be spoken to. It sort of feels more for us.
Yes, exactly that.
Yeah.
We always love to celebrate a little win or big win when it comes to branding. And I feel like that's something that everyone can appreciate it. And I think the win when it's that shareable content.
Yes.
Where it's the thing that like my mum that doesn't notice much, or my friend that isn't really engaged with like mainstream media is like, have you seen this? This is amazing. Like that's the win,
Yeah, we
isn't
love
it?
that.
But what do you think is the most common mistake that brands make?
Or missed opportunity.
I mean, I would say inauthenticity is at the core of most problems.
Right.
And actually, typically when you get a backlash, it's because people are looking at something and they go, it's jarring, it doesn't make sense, it doesn't feel authentic. Now, we're not necessarily going to call anyone out, but we've seen recent campaigns with a big kind of fast food company and having a talent attached who's very into health and well-being, and there's a backlash because they're like, yeah, but that person actively talks about eating very well. So, I think the minute you, particularly in the talent world, which is where it becomes really risky, the minute you, as a talent, put your name to something, to a brand in particular that doesn't feel authentic or isn't something that you would typically do, eat, use, go, whatever, people see through it. And it's the same for brands. So we often are working with, our brand clients to really kind of drill out who is your audience, who is your community, and actually be authentic in sort of showing up for them. And back to my earlier point of stop trying to speak to everyone.
Yeah.
Like just speak to the people that, you're trying to get after and make it make sense for them. So yeah, I think inauthenticity, and also if you don't have diversity within business, that again is where you can have inauthentic kind of mistakes, because you will have a boardroom where they're all like, oh yes, this campaign looks great, this campaign looks great, and it's an echo chamber. No one's going, oh, but like,
can we just flag that
culturally there's like a bit of a culturally appropriation, because those things, that nuance gets missed. So I think it's just making sure that you've got a sounding board and a diverse enough team, diverse enough voices to have a point of view. And even if you still go in one direction, at least you've all stress tested it before it goes out. And that's what I think has been certainly what I've observed as kind of common mistakes.
And when those mistakes or kind of it might not land in the way that everybody hoped it would land in those meetings, and whether it's an echo chamber or not, or it can be a kind of very well-versed room and everyone thinks they've got it right. And that moment when actually this is a problem we actually never foresaw coming. What do you think happens then? Because I'm always really interested in like when there's a fire to put out, and when you're like, oh, I'm waiting for this brand to talk, I'm waiting for this artist, are they going to say anything about this? Or because there's either that clear strategy, I think, when it comes to talent or when it comes to brands, that somebody will, or a brand will either instantly talk to the community that they have built and say, look, this is never meant to call, and obviously sometimes you have to wait a little bit to get it right and read the room.
Absolutely do.
But there's also that motto of, you don't complain, you don't explain. where do you stand on that? Because I would always be the person that's like, I have to say something.
Yeah.
I can't let this ride. But I also understand the push and pull with that.
I think when it's an individual, there is a different responsibility. So I'm going to give advice based on if you're a brand. And I think when you're a brand, you can't afford to go, we're just going to let this die down and see what happens. You have to respond because you are not only responsible for, yourself, but you're an organisation ultimately.
Yes.
And so there is a greater responsibility. And I do think that the brands that handle things well are the ones that go, do you know what, we've made a mistake here, or we've listened to you and we're going to respond and we're going to take this action, whether it's taking a campaign down, whether it's adjusting messaging. But actually having that open dialogue with your community as a brand is vital. And that's where you earn so much more respect from your audience because they go, oh my God, you're a big juggernaut of a brand and you've actually owned it.
There's
and we
power
really
and
respect
vulnerability.
You.
That's what we say to people all the time. And I think, we've got people like Elizabeth Day to thank for it not being taboo to make mistakes. And I think that big organisations have crisis management teams where they might anticipate some sort of backlash. And then there are things that happen in the world politically or otherwise that we just don't know about. But you're right, they have an obligation to address it in real time. That might be 24, 48 hours. I mean, that's a lifetime on
social media,
But I think they have an absolute obligation to do that and just show accountability and vulnerability because I would say in a big percentage of cases, the audience is going to receive that really well. None of us are perfect. And actually sometimes we want to see flaws in other people, especially big, meaty organisations. And then we want to see and learn from how they fix it.
Yeah. And what do you think when it comes to like personal brand? Because I always wonder because we're seeing there's a real kind of wave now, and we've seen that with Amy Smale. She was on here and she founded Odd Muse, and Odd Muse is great, but she's also, we feel like we know a lot about her, but we didn't before Odd Muse. So it's kind of like that founder-led content is actually a strategy that a lot of brands are now trying to emulate. But for her, that was an accident. She was like, I've got a social media, I've not really got followers at this point, but I'm going to try and do what I have. And then like sort of simultaneously we've watched the rise of Odd Muse, but also her as individual, which I find really interesting. So we're aware that founders are so attached to the brand, which is almost what makes the brand excel, because you're so interested in watching the behind the scenes and the glossy and everything play out together. But if the personal is so attached to the brand, that I can imagine can also be tricky if something goes wrong. Yeah. Because there's also that argument that if you respond to something instantly, you put it on someone's radar and perhaps it wasn't, and you could add fuel to the fire. So do you think there'd be a different approach in brand and in then the personal brand?
I definitely think that when it comes to individuals, it is so much, it's a lot more nuanced.
Yes.
Yeah. But I still stand by the fact that, by owning something and telling your community that you listen, you've heard it, you understand, you're learning in real time, again, I think people really respect it. But ultimately, as individuals versus bigger kind of conglomerates that are faceless, there's that reputational individual kind of piece as well that you need to protect. And I just think that there is perhaps slightly more of a cautiousness in just taking time to assess the situation before you just dive in.
Right.
And I mean, you would say that for whether it was an individual or a brand, but I think that having worked with founders as individuals, that it hurts so much more. Like when it's really emotional. And I think you also as an individual, individual founders also need to create that space for your own mental well-being. And actually when you're going to be putting yourself in the firing line, being actually able to handle that, because sometimes backlashes can be quite unrelenting, and there is a mental toll on that.
Of course, it's
real.
Of course,
yeah.
If we're going to focus on startups now, because there are so many lessons that everybody can take from the big brands, and I think that's always tends to be the inspo, doesn't it? You've seen them do that, and what if you could do that on a smaller scale and build. If we were thinking about a startup, and I suppose you had a bit of advice to say, don't waste money on this because you can get ahead without it, what would that be?
So I think it's a hybrid of things. I think this is my third startup now. I still think Good Culture's only been going 4 years, so it's still
Yeah,
a
we're a
little
baby.
startup, and
Still young.
there'll be more to come. I think look at what you've got. So look what is in your orbit. So some advice that I was given, because you get obsessed when you're launching a business. You're like, I need an office, I need an assistant, I need this, that, and the other.
All the things.
You just need this, actually. You just need this and the internet, and you can just work with what you've got. You've got friends who will make you meals when you're in the office late. You've got other friends who will take care of your kids and pick them up from school that day when you've got a meeting. You've already got clothes in your wardrobe that you've forgotten that you've got. There'll be people in your orbit that want to support your passion, but just work with what you've got before you take a penny from anyone. I've never had any investment. We never took investment for Good Culture. We just kind of worked our way up. And I think some people are so obsessed with what success looks like. And often when we look at startups, they've had huge amounts of investment, or they're smoke and mirrors, and it just isn't real life. I think you've got to have a really honest conversation with yourself about what success looks like, and know that you're not going to earn any money in the next 3 years, like really, truly, for it to kind of grow. But just increment by increment, I managed to, after the first year of working around a table with a screaming baby, managed to then have a desk in someone else's office, which was such a big step up. And because I had that, then I got the assistant who had somewhere other than my house to come, and then it increments, and you get those like moments of little wins to celebrate as well. But
because I think there's that idea of like, you see, like you say, you see things on social media, and you see a warehouse, and you see an office, and I didn't start with an office the same. It was like we would do it from my kitchen table, and then we were like, okay, there's loads of stuff in my house, and now it's like, okay, there's want for that. This is a thing, so let's get a small office, and then it slowly built to now we need somewhere with a studio, and it is sustainable. But I think sometimes we see these things that. And that is the transparency of it. Like, we've been working for however many years to get to a certain point. Like, you don't have to have everything figured out overnight and be like, okay, I do this now. That means I need X. Yeah. Those people are still figuring out the next step and the next step. And that is
100%
kind of how it happens, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
We all know that money is not a thing when you're funding something yourself up front. It's very hard to kind of make that cut through when you haven't got that support of, you know, a whether that's an investor or just a bank of finances to be able to do so. Yeah. What do you think that somebody starting a brand or a business could do to cut through and make an impact that actually doesn't cost anything?
Well, I think the fundamentals are really important, like what your social media is looking like and the content that you're putting out there. That's something that you can control. And I think if you're making snappy, fun content that's engaging and resonant, that's a really great way of starting to just build that engagement and community. I'd also say cross-marketing. So thinking about looking kind of left and right of you and thinking about brands or kind of offerings that sort of sit in your similar world, whereby there's good shared equity. So you might want to do like a competition with, you know, if you're a skincare brand and there's a gorgeous silk wrap or hair care, whatever, there might be some cross-pollination, like competition type things that you can do. So then you're getting exposure to their audience, they're getting exposure to your audience. I also think no matter how big or small you are, you really do need to put aside something for gifting and seeding so that you can actually, if you're a product business, get your product out to individuals, to people. And again, they don't have to be big influencers, big kind of celebrity talent. It can be more micro individuals who've got like 10K plus followers. But it will really help to just drive visibility for your brand and keep sustaining that momentum.
I also saw something actually on Instagram. I'm like obsessed with all these like marketing reels that people make now. And they're like, this is a deep dive inside this brand and how they did it. And Pia Mance, who founded Heaven Mayhem, she openly talks about the fact that she actually really wanted to have her jewellery on Hailey Bieber. And it was like a thing, and that's what she wanted. And she's quite explicit in saying I went after it. So what I did is I like gifted her friends. And then got to a point where she liked it.
Well,
that-
she noticed it.
that
and
then she went through the stylist, but then it landed, and then it ended up on Hayley because her friends were sharing it and wearing it, and then I suppose it was then on her radar. So by the
Totally,
time
yeah.
gifting arrived for her,
Totally.
it was, and I thought that was quite smart and
Yeah.
actually quite a useful tool to, you know, look who is in the community
world.
of that person and be quite strategic with that.
We've
Yeah.
had that with Lisa Eldridge,
Yeah.
who we look after, who's an amazing makeup
I
artist.
love her. She's amazing.
And people want to get to Kate Winslet and they'll kind of go via her. And I think that just not wanting to have a mass approach, being very targeted and manifesting what you want to happen and then going after it really intentionally will give you time to do that deep dive into community. We often do that. I mean, brands will do that. They'll have a budget of X, and they'll invite somebody that's on the periphery of a group of people that they kind of want to work with, and they'll invite them and they'll incentivize them to come, and then you almost get this ensemble cast piece, or you'll book a DJ that's going out with someone and they're probably going to come along and support, and then you just get this like swell
Yes.
of cool and vibey, but you've actually only really had to pay for this over here.
Yeah. It's the tricks, isn't it?
It is.
Jo Malone said something I thought was interesting, that when she first got her store and actually nobody knew who they were, it was about sort of getting the bags. So, you know, the big sort of Jo Malone bags, and
listening
people
to
would
this.
walk up and down the
Yeah,
street
yeah,
with
yeah.
the
Love that.
and just constantly sort of, and lots of people, there's like little tricks, isn't there? And
Yeah.
little hacks that you can actually, all of a sudden you're on someone's radar.
Yeah.
And it's quite simple.
Well, it's also just about that repetition is recognition. So if you're seeing something, and we try and do this sort of metric where we're trying to pop up in someone's orbit, like our audience, our customer, sort of 4 different ways.
Right.
And so we think about those 4 sort of spaces that they occupy. So, you know, obviously it's on social. So it's thinking about the things that they follow, what they like, how we're showing up there. Then it might be via collaboration. So Aloe's a really good example of that, because they'll do an activation over Fashion Week. So then they're popping up in that sort of fashion lane, and you're like, oh, I'm seeing you there. And then it might be a really kind of disruptive partnership. So I think what Mel made me do it with Blank Street, for instance. Genius. But then it's popping up there, and it's similar to what you guys are doing with Cloucher and Grind. You're thinking about the different worlds in which you can infiltrate, so that your audience is constantly seeing you and you're meeting them where they are.
Yeah.
And then you'll have dinner with the girls and they'll go, have you got, and you'll be like, oh my God, that's it, the 4th time. And then you're on your phone in the taxi home and you've bought it. But I think we do need that different, you know, turning up in 4 different ways, word of mouth, social, whatever it is.
And Rode do that really well.
Yeah.
Like when you think about, again, really simple marketing with the phone cases.
That is like
genius.
the
It's in my
move
bag.
on all moves.
It's in my bag just
Exactly.
because it won't fit in my pocket. But
Yeah, but
It doesn't fit in a pocket, does it?
It doesn't. It's not for the pocket.
doesn't.
But it is. It's kind of that thing of, actually it became so cultish. You know, everyone was doing the selfies with the thing, because it was like, you want to be part of that little club.
Yeah.
And so I think simple ways of innovating and creating funny, I guess, quirky, shareable moments don't have to be expensive. I'm sure they just did that as a bit of a one-off. It wasn't probably meant to be
Well, it's
something
that
that's sustained.
souvenir of experience.
Yeah.
You know, there's still that Chanel lipstick analogy of, we all want to be the Chanel girl. We all want access to that brand, but we can get it now for, I don't know how much a lipstick is, 25, 30 quid. And you can own that. And that's a souvenir of your experience of the brand. And it's your first in, and it'll always make you feel something, the fact that you could play in that space. So I think it goes back to creativity. Creativity, best story wins. Can you be innovative? Can you create a democratic access point for people to play with and start to engage with your brand? For Damson Madder, who are an amazing fashion brand that we work with, you know, they are a fantastic sweet spot actually of a price point, but you can get a scrunchie, you know, those oversized scrunchies all the girlies wear. You can get that for under 20 quid. And it's, you know, that it's got such
entry
strong
level
brand DNA that you'll be on the tube. And, you know, some of us, we want to keep things to ourselves, but most of the time you want to look left and right and go, oh my God, she's cool. She's got one. Now I want one.
Yes.
And I can get it. And it's not going to be like a big spend. It's going to be, you know, I don't have to think about it. I can get it that month. I don't have to wait till payday, and you're already in, you're on the journey. So yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right in that targeted. Like, it is so important. That's one thing that you don't have to have the biggest budget in the world, but if you find where these people are, and it's, I mean, I'm making myself sound a little bit baby reindeer out here, but you know what I mean? if you
wait outside
the window, not scary at all.
Yeah.
But if you are targeted and you're kind of really considered in your approach, I think that will always win.
Yeah.
I mean, we also saw this the other day with lovely Sabrina Elba, who was on your pod and is our client and just our shared friend and lovely woman.
Isn't she?
And she just did a very small, fun, playful pop-up with a cafe called Sable.
Yeah.
And obviously she had Sable, her brand, and they had Sable, the cafe. And it was like she just did a pop-up, gorgeous little cart. They did sort of personalised matcha cookies that were sort of Sable inspired, and it's a way of getting into the neighbourhood, getting the product out there, not hugely expensive, but it's just nice content and good storytelling.
Yes, yeah. It's not, and those moments, those activations are always so important, where people can come along and see it and feel like they're part of whatever this is.
Yeah. And meet the founder as well, because that's also really, people just are so used to brands almost being faceless that actually to get in front of a founder,
a human,
feels, it
you're
feels
real.
like, and it feels like they're doing it because they care and there's heart, and I think that's what people love.
Each episode I ask, as you know, our guests to leave a tip that I suppose it's something you wish that you would have known when you're starting out, and something that I suppose our listener can action today. So I've got two of you, which is great. So I'm going to get two tips.
Yes.
Why not?
Two
for
for
the price of one.
There you go.
What would you say, Jordan, would be your tip?
I think, and this is a tip for anyone at any stage in their sort of founder journey, is to obsess on your audience. And your audience can change, it can grow, it can iterate, but really obsess on where they're showing up, what they like to read, what they like to consume, where they like to go. And because once you get into the detail, then you can help to make sure that your brand is showing up in the spaces that make sense to your audience. And no audience is, no one person is the same. So really just get obsessed and get into the detail, and you'll definitely get cut through in the end.
Yeah, it's so true, isn't it? It's almost like there's no embarrassment with the obsession.
No, you've got to really understand.
Following them on social media, how does that created list of people look to you? Where are they shopping? What are they using?
Who are they following?
And it shouldn't feel like work. It'll be fascinating if it's going to lead to your brand extension.
Yes. It's kind of
Good
like
tip.
really good homework. You know
It's
what I mean? It's kind
really
of like
fun homework.
Yeah.
Exactly. There you go.
How about you, Liz?
So I think that there is, especially for women, stigma attached to, you should have figured out what you want to do, what your contribution to culture is, what your job is, your passion is by a certain age. And we're getting younger and younger. We've got, an MD who's 30. And I think that limitations on age, we have enough of them as women when it comes to reproduction and other things. And I think someone I have loved listening to, and I didn't really know much about her in her first career, is Trini.
Oh, she's
Trini
amazing.
London. And at 53, she started that business. And, my understanding is relatively learnt on the job, which I also love, and iterated and developed and was vulnerable and shared it and listened to her community. That business is not even a decade old. I think it's 7-8 years in, and it's worth 180 million globally. So
she's amazing.
I just think if she can do that at 53, and you've got a passion, and that's where all good business opportunities come from, is spotting a gap, having a passion. Don't put an age as a limiter on it.
Absolutely that. And we've had Trini as a guest, and she took a punt, not only just a punt, she flipped her whole life upside down.
Yeah.
She had a clothes sale to raise money.
Wow.
She sold her house to raise money. She rented somewhere with her daughter, having,
She backed
it
herself.
been a world of grief because her daughter lost her dad.
Yeah.
And felt that real responsibility of being a mother and showing up, but also felt like she had this burning desire to do something.
But what a great legacy for
And
her daughter
exactly
as well.
that. And she, ironically, she says that she was so worried at the time, as in for her family, like she knew this was something that she really knew she had to do, but it was a lot riding on it happening. But now hearing her daughter speak of her mum and how inspiring she finds it, and how kind of that she really is leading by example is kind of, it is so incredible. And like you say, it's so weird to me that there's this age limitation on stuff, or this kind of like sex limitation on, like it's so frustrating. And I'm like, when are we going to say to a woman, oh, you look great, not for your age, but just, you know what I mean?
Great, full stop.
Exactly that. I've loved this so much. This has been like the best hangout ever. And I know that there's so much that everyone can take away from this. So thank you, girls.
Thank you for having us.
Don't forget to follow us on Apple and Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts to make sure you don't miss out, because next week we're going to be talking to another incredible lady who launched. If, like me, you're a watcher, then please follow us on YouTube and don't forget to like and subscribe.